So it's still great to see everybody here. I mean, let me ask a question. Has anyone dealt with an REO and had trouble getting information from a listing agent? Right? It's one of the biggest common things I hear across the board. And I'll admit, sometimes I was that REO listing agent that people were probably cursing at. So one thing I wanted to share, and one thing I'm passionate about, is there is a myth about REO properties, that there's some secret sauce out there. I see all the emails, attend our free webinar, we'll give you property assignments. I've seen every scam out there when it comes to REO properties. And the reason I know they're scams is because I know what it takes to build an REO inventory, and they make it sound easy. So I'm going to ask everybody here, you guys let me know, is that all right if I'm just brutally honest with you today about this process and how it works? Yeah. Is that all right if it's no hold barred? I might curse a little bit. I can't control myself, so if I do, I apologize. But I just want to make sure it's okay that I'm brutally honest with everybody about this process. I was passionate about being an REO agent in my prior real estate career. It's not glamorous. There's a lot of weird things that have happened. I've almost been shot. I've almost been bit by a pit bull. I tried to clear a fence, and I was not as athletic as I used to be, but I still got over. I was called the Grinch who stole Christmas, and I'll admittedly admit that I took a tree and threw it out the door in front of the sheriff's officer. So these are some of the stories I'm going to unpack with you guys. And you know what's the best part about these stories? They're true. One of my biggest pet peeves in the real estate industry today is there are a lot of people who are teaching things that they have never done. YouTube has made a lot of fake real estate superstars who coach. What we're going to do is tell you exactly what's working in the market, exactly how I built it, exactly where the REO inventory is going. I've been through the REO cycle where I've seen the REOs turn off like a faucet. Not once, but twice. So some of you be thinking, why do I even need to know about REOs? I hate dealing with the banks. It's annoying. But, you know, someone told me to come to the seminar, so here I am. But our job as agents is to be experts in the industry. Our job used to be access to properties. The truth is now, do buyers really need us to view the inventory that's on the MLS like they used to? No, between all the different portals, right? How many times has a buyer gone to you and found a property that you didn't know about because the agent who was 100 miles away put it in an MLS that wasn't there, so it didn't pick up on your search? Does that happen to anybody? But what is our real job? Why are we not being replaced? If you look at the stats with NAR, people are using realtors at a higher rate than any other time. It's because of our market knowledge. It's because we know what's happening with properties and the market. So the reason I say that is I am very big on educating buyers, doing a buyer consultation, letting buyers know what to expect in the market. And I would, during my buyers' presentations, is let the buyers know about the different type of sales out there. And I would let them know about an REO listing. There's nothing more frustrating to a buyer when they submit an offer and they don't get a response right away. Has anyone here put an offer in for a buyer? They take 7 days to get a response and that buyer calls you every 20 minutes? With REOs is they might wait 2 weekends before they respond to an offer. They might wait 7 days. It is a different process. And the more you can educate your buyers about the process, what are you doing in that buyer's eyes? You're being that local expert. You're being that person they can turn to through the process. You are being something that Zillow, Redfin, Trulia, and whatever other websites can't be. Millennials are using agents. But our job as an agent is we have to be a professional. We talk about it all the time in this industry. Do you want to be an amateur or do you want to be a professional? Because the professionals are going to last and have a long career. The amateurs are going to be out at the next bump. And in the next 6 months, we're going to see a lot of agents exit the business. That's just the truth. So knowing what's happening, knowing how it impacts the consumer, and how to explain it to your client is crucial. So what happened was REO inventory in 2019 was going on a big decline. Inventory was tightening up. What happened in March 2020? We get hit with the pandemic. Right away, they stopped doing all foreclosures and evictions. So the REO pipeline literally got turned off like a faucet. Years ago, I was handling 250 REO properties, right? At the time of pandemic hit, there was probably about 20, and that was it, complete stop. I saw that one other time. In 2009, REO was really cruising. Everything was going well with the REO business. 2008, we had the big economic crash. In 2009, there was a new term that I've never heard before that I think people made up called robo-signing. So what happened is basically the government saying, hey, you guys are foreclosing on properties and we don't even know who's really foreclosing and who owns the property. So the 5 major lenders at the time, JP Morgan, Bank of America, because they had to acquire Countrywide, they all stopped foreclosing. It went from properties to someone again turned off the faucet. Luckily, as an REO agent, I was very diversified and a lot of local regional banks weren't affected by this. So we still have properties coming in, but it put some REO listing agents out of business. Why do I explain this to you? I always had the philosophy in my business is you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And that's true whether it's REO, residential resale, commercial, whatever it is, you do not want to put all your eggs in one basket. I had a lot of different accounts when I was an REO agent. I probably had about 20 different accounts. So when I had 20 different accounts and one told me that they're reshuffling and I'm no longer an approved broker in their network, do you think I was really concerned? No, because I had 19 other accounts that I was getting business from. And I talk about this with your listing inventory, right? Things are a little different right now, I understand. But I always say your business changes when you're carrying 10 listings at a time. Right now, not many people are carrying 10 listings at a time, right? Not many people are carrying 10 listings at all. But your business changes. When you have 10 listings and one person wants to withdraw that listing and you have 9 other listings, you care a lot less than when you have one listing and they want to withdraw it, right? So when you're looking at your business, you always want to come from a place from abundance, not from a place of scarcity. I'm big on quotes. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's from a very famous person in my life. It's my mom. Not famous in your life, famous in my life. When I grew up, my parents had a motto that we had to live by. And it's right up here. So excuse me, I'm going to curse, but that's how it was in my house. When you get knocked down, you got to get the fuck back up. My house was not the, oh, we're going to coddle you and participation awards, right? My house is you get knocked down, you get back up. I grew up with a really bad speech impediment. I couldn't speak till I was 5. Nobody could understand me. My parents never let me use that as sympathy. I was born cross-eyed. I've never woken up and been able to see crystal clear. Not one day in my life. I had to get eye surgeries as a baby, all this nonsense. My parents would never let me feel sorry. My grandparents used to come over and be like, oh my God, we feel so bad for them. My mom would literally tell them to shut up or get out. She's like, it's life. It could always be worse. So the reason I tell this and I share my story is I got in the real estate industry in 2005. I was 25 years old. I just went through college. I just got a master's degree at Lehigh. I got a job. I was there 1 week thinking it was my dream job, and I hated it. Do you know how depressing that is, that you just went through 5 years of college, and after 1 week, you realized you hate your job? So I called my parents. I said, Mom, Dad, I'm moving home. Nothing but silence on the other end of the phone. I said, Mom, Dad, I'm moving home. Like, yeah. They're like, you've been out of the house since 18. Like, what do you mean you're moving home? I said, listen, I want to get into real estate. I'm 25 years old. I'm not married. I don't have kids. I want to go all in right now. I got a Discover credit card. I still have it. I share the story all the time with 0% interest for 12 months. I said, I'm going to use this credit card. I'm going to bet on myself. I want to enjoy life. I still want to get my shore house in Belmar. Hey, it is what it is, right? I still wanted to go out. I was the guy saying, hey, I'll put it on my credit card. Give me the cash. That's how I lived for a year. But I bet on myself, and I worked really, really hard, and people tried to knock me down. I didn't have my first close until I was 8 months into this business. And in that first calendar year, I did $12 million, 12 or 15, somewhere around there, in sales volume. And it's not like 12 or 15 million now. This was 12 or 15 million in 2007 when maybe 3 people on the board did that much. And how did I do it? I had a bad speech problem. I'm not smooth on the phone, but I just worked really hard. And I always remember what my parents would tell me. If you get knocked down, you just pull your ass up. So what happened was, 7 years of doing this, I got bored. When I get bored, it's not good. So I get bored. I said, I got this great idea. I'm going to buy a real estate office. Right? Bought a real estate. 3 things happened to me in that 2 weeks. I got engaged to my wife, which was awesome. Don't want to do that again. I really like my wife. Second is, bought a real estate office with 8 agents. I've bought other real estate offices since, so that's cool. And 3, I got into a lawsuit with my old broker over a non-compete I signed when I was 22 years old and hadn't done nothing. I was in court for a year and a half. Has anyone ever been through the court system? It's not fun. It's not logical. So I literally had to stop doing REOs. So my plan was, yeah, I'll buy this real estate office, I'll do my REOs, I'll grow a team, people want to join. Mike Tyson has a quote, everyone has a game plan until they get punched in the face. So my game plan went out the window. Now I have no REOs, I got to pay for a wedding. And you know, if anyone who ever been married, you just use the word wedding, all the prices are 5 times as much as they were if it was just an event. Right? So I'm paying for a wedding, I'm paying for rent. I'm back to a 0% credit card, paying my rent on the credit card. I always tell this story here. Who here has heard of Eric LeGrand? Eric LeGrand played football for Rutgers. He was paralyzed while on the field. Yeah. He's the head of the Christopher Reeve Foundation for paraplegics. Local boy, went to Colonial High School. I heard him the next day on the radio. He was on the show, Boomer and Carton. So when Boomer and Carton, you know, see, I do this speech all over the country. It's a lot easier to do it in New Jersey because Boomer and Carton, and then I got to tell the story how he went to jail over like a Ponzi scheme, and people were like, only in New York, right? So Boomer and Carton had Eric LeGrand on, and Eric LeGrand was sitting there, and he was talking about how he was the luckiest man on the face of the earth. So I'm listening to this the day after I got a court order saying I couldn't do REOs anymore. Again, I told you guys I was going to be completely transparent in my story. So this is me being transparent. I was in my apartment. I remember hearing him on the radio. I'm sitting at the edge of the bed. I'm like, this guy is bound to a wheelchair talking about how he is the luckiest man, and I'm having a pity party for myself sitting on the edge of a bed because I can't sell REOs. But I can still sell. So I said, fuck it. I got to get to work. You get knocked down, you get the fuck back up, right? Just could hear like my mom's like voice in her head. So after that, you know, we grew the brokerage, and I rebuilt the REO business to double the size I had ever built it before. When everybody told me, you're done, you'll be put out of business, banks will never work with you again, I heard everything. But you know what I did? I ignored them. It's one of my best qualities, except for I can't do it with my 5-year-old. I can't ignore her when she's driving me nuts, right? But I ignored all the noise, and I went back to what I knew what to do. I went back to the basics, and I rebuilt the business to an even better thing. So the reason I say this is building your business, whether it's an REO business, whether it's a real estate business, whether it's a buyer's agent business, and I get it, we are in one of the most frustrating markets right now. If you're working with buyers, it's frustrating. Even when you're working with sellers, it's frustrating. That's not a popular statement, But when you're a listing agent right now, you're getting bombarded by agents, you're getting bombarded by people, you're being accused of X, Y, Z. It's like a no-win situation. Everybody's on edge. The listing agents, the buyer's agents, everybody's on edge. It's hard. But I also try to remember this about when I get knocked down, because nothing lasts forever. Markets will change. This will not be the market forever. I came in 2005 and everybody talked about this great market. Rates are so low, 4.5%. Now people hear 4.5%, they go nuts. Rates are so high. I was there in 2008. I worked with this bank called IndyMac Bank. They were a great client of mine. I'm sitting there having dinner with my dad, watching the news, watching consumers rush the bank like it's the Great Depression to take the money out. And I just remember looking at my dad going, well, I guess I lost that account. There goes that bank, right? And the reason I was able to build a big REO business was I was constantly prospecting. I know sometimes that word is like a curse word in this business, but I was consistently prospecting. And if you really want to build your business to levels that you don't even think you can, it's the power of prospecting. So, that was a little bit about my story. Now I really want to unpack what I did to build an REO business and what I've taught others to do. So I'm going to start real basic, because I get this question. You guys are probably thinking, why is he going to do this? I'm going to explain the difference between an REO and a short sale. And if you don't know the difference, it's okay, because a lot of agents don't know the difference. So when I couldn't do REOs, I was like, well, I got to do something. I flipped the script and I did 60 short sales in a year. 60 short sales. Most people are like, ugh. But I did 60 short sales in that 1 year. So the short sale is basically a contract between you and the seller, and the bank is a third-party contingency. A lot of agents get that wrong. They think the bank is signing contract. The bank is merely contingent part of the contract to get the sale approved. And I always say this about banks. They don't work by common sense. They work by guidelines, and just accept that. Because I've had so many people tell me, well, this doesn't make sense. I'm like, well, welcome to my life, right? Because you have to work within the guidelines. So I think I was able to do so many short sales is because I looked at it as like, well, I can't do REOs, but I already know what the bank's looking for. I already know what the process is for the bank. Let me just reverse engineer it and get to the front end of it. So the short sale is the pre-foreclosure process. The sheriff sale is the holy grail. It's the marriage. It's when the property goes from a short sale back to the bank. New Jersey, there's a 10-day redemption period. Properties never get redeemed. Then they go back to the bank if it's not bought by the investor. Then they look to get somebody like me to list the property on their behalf. And we're going to unpack what all that looks like. But let me dip into a little bit of what I think the future of the REO business looks like. So we saw 2020, everything came to a halt. We saw that a lot of people were doing forbearance. Studies show, the number and the data is there, is that, I'm going to be frank, I don't think REOs are coming back right now in a big wave. Let me ask you a question here. Who in this room has put in an offer with a strong buyer with a lot of cash down and you didn't get the offer accepted? That's a rhetorical question. Everybody raise their hands, because if you wrote an offer in the last 2 years, that happened, right? In 2005, when I was in the market, even starting to begin selling REOs, because there are REOs in every market, people were buying houses with 100% down and 6% seller concessions. There is so much money right now being bought into the market compared to what it was in 2005 and 2006. So really 2008 was when we saw a lot of mortgages get readjusted. We saw unemployment skyrocket, and we saw the banks collapse. That's what we saw. Right now, we're in a different market. If the market goes down 20%, a lot of people are just losing equity in their home, but doesn't mean they're losing their home. So I don't think we have a big tidal wave coming. If you look at the number with forbearances, most of them have been worked out. If you didn't stop paying your mortgage in 2020 and you put your house on the market right now, there's a pretty good chance you still have a lot of equity in your house. So a lot of people were able to avoid. But it's still good to know about REOs because no matter what and no matter what market, we're going to have REOs. It just depends on how many we're going to have. In my opinion, I think 2011 was the biggest year of REOs. And then what happened in 2011 is the presidential cabinet came up with a new loan modification where what happened, they basically said, hey, Carl, how much can you afford to pay every month? I could pay $1,000. Fine, that's your new mortgage payment. We'll put the rest on the back end of the loan. And that's what really stopped slowing down the foreclosure wave in 2011. So I don't think with the current political situation, with the current economic situation, that we don't have a tidal wave coming. So you see reports on Inman, you see reports on this. Does anyone here know the term clickbait? Yeah. There's a lot of clickbait going on right now. Foreclosures are soaring, up 32, up whatever percentage. It's up from 0. Yes, there's more foreclosures because when you have none and then you have one, you can make a headline that there's more foreclosures. So we're going to see more defaults, we're going to see more foreclosures, but we're not going to get back to any type of tidal wave numbers anytime soon. So if you want to leave, you can leave. But again, I just want to be realistic to you about where I see the market headed. So on that note, New Jersey is still one of the highest states in foreclosure rates in the country. This is data from December 2021. Delaware, if any of you want to move to Delaware after this presentation, is number 1 in foreclosure rate. New Jersey's number 2, Illinois is 3, Maryland and South Carolina. I'm actually surprised because typically what we would see in these maps is, you know who would typically be number 1? Florida. Apparently in the last 2 years, a lot of people want to move to Florida. So we're not seeing them rank as high anymore in the foreclosure rates. New Jersey, New York would typically be around number 2. So New Jersey staying strong, number 2. But we did see states like Florida. We used to also see Arizona and Las Vegas in the top of the foreclosure rates. But again, I think a lot of people right now are moving to those areas. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in those areas long term. So any fool, does anyone know who Richard Branson is? Yeah, he's flying in space, doing a couple things. So he's got a quote that I love too. So he's a little bit more famous than my mom. But any fool can make something seem complicated. It's hard to make something seem simple. Has anyone ever talked to an REO agent and they just spew nonsense out of their mouth? You're like, I don't even know what this guy's talking about, right? If I ever did that, I apologize. So anyway, it's really not a complicated process, but it's a process. It's different. And the reason I wanted to do this today is there's a lot of agents out there who think, oh, all you have to do is you get a listing agreement, you put the house on the market, and you just sell the property. If that was the truth, I'd still have my hair, because I had hair when I started this business. And I'd be living in Florida because it'd be so easy, right? There's a lot more that goes into REO business than just getting a listing agreement and just putting it on the market. So let's talk a little bit about why people go to foreclosure. The number one thing is decrease in income, right? I don't know if you guys have been reading the headlines, but there's a lot of jobs out there right now. There's a lot of employment opportunities. If anything, we're seeing incomes go up, right? There's always going to be medical and illness reasons that people let the house go. There's always people going to be getting divorced. I think there's some stat that it's 50%. I don't know if anyone else has heard that in the news. The inability to sell your house is 6%. I don't think anyone's having that much trouble selling their house right now, do you? So you could, that, and a 1.4% adjustment on a mortgage. Can I ask, raising hands here, who here has seen a buyer get an ARM mortgage in the last 3 years, the last 5 years? Okay, the mortgage guys raised their hand. Not many. 2005, listen, I did it. The first house I bought was a 7-1, ARM, stupid. Well, it was stupid for me at the time. I'm not saying they're stupid, sorry, mortgage guys. I'm not saying they're stupid, it was stupid for me at the time. But you don't see the ARMs, you don't see the adjustments that you're going to be seeing. And I actually think ARMs are going to become more popular again as we see the rates increasing. And I think they will make sense for a lot of people as rates increase. But that's a whole different subject. So we're not going to see a lot of adjustments of rates on mortgages. So again, I think this is going to keep our foreclosure rates down. Let's go back. Tim Grover, book Relentless. Make a plan that truly reflects your goals and interests, and you'll be more likely to execute. Why pretend you're going to work out every single day when you know you're going to do it 3 times a week? Has anyone here ever been to the gym in January? Right? And you're like, oh, I'm never going to see these people in 2 weeks, right? Because they went from not working out to being like Rocky Balboa. It's the same thing with prospecting. When I talk to an agent and we sit down there and we dissect their business, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to make calls every day for the next, I'm going to now start prospecting 5 days a week. So I'm like, okay, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but let's just say you're going to go from 0 days to 5 days. That could be a little bit of a stretch. Why don't we try for 2 days? Why don't we try for 3 days? Because what happens is, what wins in the long run in prospecting? Thank you. Consistency is the most important part of your prospecting. I would rather have someone prospect pretty poorly 3 days a week over a year than someone who does it really well once a month. Right? It's just the efforts. It's the, you don't have to have the perfect script. I always say this, I see agents all the time. A lot of agents are getting ready to get ready. Like, I'm going to start prospecting, but first I bought this really cool desk, and then I touch the pedal here, the light comes on. And then I got this printer, so after I put the note in my CRM, it's going to use through Zapier. It's going to automatically print it out. It's going to be revolutionized prospecting. You know what I do to those agents? I look at a telephone, I pick it up, and I start hitting numbers. When I started prospecting, when I got in this business, there was no Zillow. There was no Trulia. You couldn't buy leads. I was 25 and broke, so guess what most of my friends were? 24 and broke. So I couldn't sell them houses. So I had to get to work. I want to go through the prospecting thing. And I use this thing. Now everybody, I don't have it with me, but there was a thing back in the day. It sat on a desk. It had 9 numbers and a pound and a star, and it had a cord. And I would pick it up, and I would hit the numbers. You know what happened? Somebody would pick up on the other end. And we had to sell it. It was old. I built my REO business on old school business-to-business sales, getting around the gatekeeper, coming over sales objections, building a pipeline. I tell this to some people, and they're like, mind is blown. They're like, that worked? I'm like, yeah, duh, it worked. Right? Prospecting is such a major key, building those connections, building those relationships. I remember one of my first sales in this business. Are you ready to hear this? In 2006. I shit you not, this was my second deal in the business. I sold a house in Homedale. I double-ended it for $1.2 million. I'm like, this business is easy. And I got that. It was a Bank of America. Excuse me, it was Countrywide at the time. A lot of you don't even know. You could Google Countrywide. So it was Countrywide at the time, and I had this contact. The lady's name was Jean Tucker. I knew everything about Jean. So much so that after all these years, I still remember her name. She was in charge of handing out the properties for Countrywide, which had a lot of foreclosures in New Jersey. And I asked her for the property because I knew it was $1 million property. I was 25. Who else was giving me $1 million property? And $1 million properties then were a lot different than $1 million property now. Not as money. I got it. I sold it to the neighbor. I was like, this business is cake. It's easy. But you know what? People are like, you got lucky. I'm like, oh, I did get lucky. If I wasn't consistently prospecting and I didn't put myself in that position to get the listing, I wouldn't have gotten it. So people would tell me luck, and I would smile, and I would turn around and go, they don't know what they're talking about. Right? So again, it's just setting your plan. Who here has been to a seminar like this? You're ready. You get up at the end of it, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go. And then a week later, you don't even remember what the seminar was about. Right? This seminar is not going to help you get more business. But the actions and steps and accountability you take when you leave today is what's going to make the difference. Whether it's an REO seminar, whether it's one of our listing seminars, whatever seminar it might be. Man, I think we've had seminars how to give a seminar. But what you do when you leave the room and the plan you make and the mindset is what's going to make the difference. Because nobody's going to do it for you. So, who here knows what a BPO is? Broker price opinion, right? I'm going to be very honest with everybody here today. The only BPOs I've ever done were for BPOs on my listings. Or with a bank I did and they asked me to do a BPO. There are a ton of companies out there that will pay you $50 or nothing to run around the state of New Jersey and give free price opinions. So what a BPO is basically is a CMA. Let's talk about, so a lot of agents will be like, I'm going to do a ton of BPOs, and from those BPOs, I'm going to get an REO listing. To me, it can happen. I don't want to sound like, but it's a lot. I like to utilize my time a little bit better. So with the BPOs, I'm going to talk about some reasons why BPOs are used. So sometimes people buy what they call a pool of loans. Who here saw The Big Short? I can't explain it that cool, but I just want to know if you saw it. So, right, so it's a group of loans. It's like 2,000 loans that are underperforming that a company buys. They want to get the value of what those loans could be before they buy it. So what they do is they'll go to a BPO company and say, we need values on these 2,000 houses, so we know what to buy this pool of loans for. So chances are you're never going to get any of those REO listings. Chances are you're going to do them, and then I'm going to list them. I've had agents call me cursing at me because they said they did the BPO on the property and then I ended up listing it. Sorry? So to me is you can get REOs doing BPOs, but there's companies out there who will say if you do BPOs for us for free and it goes back to us, we'll get the listing. The chances of that happening is not high. When I play blackjack and the dealer has a 6, I don't like to hit. Am I going to lose sometimes? Yeah, but the percentage says I shouldn't hit, and I'm not going to hit. So I don't like spending all my time in BPOs. You got to really figure out where your time is best used. And this is, again, prospecting across all businesses. Yeah, something might work, but you got to think, how much time are you putting into it? I like to go through the path of least resistance. So I'm pretty passionate when I see agents doing a lot of BPOs in the hopes to get an REO listing. I sit down and say, how much time did you spend on these BPOs? If we take that time and cut it in half and put it in this direction, are you going to get a better return on your time? Time is the most precious commodity we have, more so than money, right? A billionaire who's 50 can go make another $1 billion, but he can't be 25 again. So you have to evaluate the time you're spending on your prospecting. And again, this goes across the boards, not just for REOs. And if you're not doing any prospecting, then you've got nothing to worry about. So another thing is portals. This is just a list of some of the portals that are out there to list REOs. I'm going to be frank, I've never spent $1 on a portal if it wasn't because I didn't have a listing in that system. Some of the portals will charge you money and you'll never see it again. I'll just say, give me half of it and we'll call it a day. But seriously, there's a lot. So what I would always do is I would get the contact of the bank, which we're going to go through in a little bit. And then they would tell me, hey, for me to give you this assignment, you have to be in this portal and you have to pay for the premium membership. Then I would pay for it. So again, these are just some of the portals. And if you want, if you sign in today, we'll send out everybody a copy of the slides. So you don't have to take pictures and stuff. But these are all portals that I've worked with. So I'm going to go through the prospecting plan. This is what I did for 6 months. Very lonely. So here, it's even better because now it's online. This is a live screenshot of the Middlesex County Sheriff's Sale list. So it has a docket number, it has a date, it has who the plaintiff is. The plaintiff is the bank. Now, some of this can be a wild goose chase, so I'll go into that in a little bit. It gives you the address, it gives you the defendant, and it even gives you the loan amount and the status. So when I got into this in 2005, all of this wasn't even online yet. So I would go every day of the week to a sheriff's sale. By the time it went so much that I would walk in and I knew everybody there. And I would sit down and write down the results of the sheriff's sale. 123 Main Street went to Countrywide. 124 Main Street went to this bank. 125 went to this bank because it wasn't online yet. So what was that? Why was I doing that? I was building my database. I was building my pipeline. I wanted REOs. These were REOs. So I would go to the sheriff's sales. I'd get the results. I would meet investors. And then I would literally go check out the property. I know it might be easy to see is I wanted to see whether the property was vacant or occupied. Sometimes it's tricky, sometimes it's pretty easy. Property on the left, do you think that was occupied? These are real properties too that I went to. Property on the left, do you think that was occupied or vacant? It's pretty occupied. Well manicured, grass cut, house kept in really great shape. So I would take a picture of that. Example on the right, do you think that was occupied or vacant? That was vacant. The tarp on the roof. If you see on the door, you'll see the actual sheriff's sale posting on the door. So what happens typically is when you're going through the foreclosure process, you get notice from the sheriff, and they'll tape it on your door. So typically, if the people are living in the house, they don't really like a sheriff's sale notice taped on their door, so they take it off. But if a property's vacant and nobody's there, they leave it on. It's just some of the clues. Other clues, I don't have pictures, is the mailbox. If it's usually shoved full of mail, I'm not telling you to open anyone's mail, but if it's shoved full of mail and nobody's been getting it, it's probably vacant. If it's a line of if it's all the newspapers sitting on the front, it's typically vacant. So I would take pictures of this house, and then my goal was, okay, how do I get to the person who's going to assign this property to a broker? How do I demonstrate my value when I first talk to them? And I talk about this too in your residential resale. I mean, I'm pretty big on pre-listing packets and dealing with sellers. Would you guys agree we're in a pretty competitive listing market right now? Our job is to demonstrate our value of why somebody should list with us over somebody else before you walk in the door. So if I got this information, I am now calling, and I always say this, you want to call with a purpose. Has anyone ever here got that awkward sales call or like, hey, I'm checking in call, and you just want to hang up and they just want to hang up, right? It sucks. But if you could call with a certain value, so I was calling saying I want to make this asset manager's job easier. This property, if it's not across his desk, is going to come across his desk, and I can let him know about it. So, real life example. I worked with Investor Savings Bank, local regional bank out of New Jersey. I think they just got bought out. Oh, that's another thing about this REO business. You might have the best contact in the world. I handled Sovereign Bank, every single property in the state of New Jersey. I had a great contact there. She became my friend. You know what else happened? She got pregnant and left the job. The new person didn't like me as much because they thought I was too tied into the last asset manager. So that account changed very quick. I was dealing with banks, Fremont Investment and Loans. Anyone ever heard of that? Yeah, why would you? Out of business. New Century was the biggest subprime lender. I used to sell their REOs, one of the first ones gone. So all these banks I was dealing with, I mean, literally dealing with people, I would talk to them on a Friday at 2 o'clock, and on Monday they were no longer there. So things change all the time, and you just got to kind of roll with the punches. So this is what I would do. Let's just say the property went back to Investor Savings Bank. I'm like, well, how do I talk to somebody at Investor Savings Bank? I had this crazy idea. You guys ready? I found the 1-800 phone number. Next, oh, come on. I found here, get in touch, 1-855, bop, bop, bop. All right. I would pick up the phone, call 1-800-555. I would get to the gatekeeper. Does everybody know what a gatekeeper is? It's the person who whose sole job is for you not to talk to the decision maker. And the decision maker in this part was the asset manager. I wanted to get to that asset manager. That gatekeeper wanted to keep me away from the asset manager. I thought it was a little fun. I used to have fun with this. I used to call up, ding, ding, ding. Hey, I'm calling about 123 Main Street. I was actually down the street, like, you know, I own a property down the street. And I just wanted to see who's handling that property. I have some questions about it. You know what they would do? They would transfer me to somebody else because they couldn't just hang up on me. Yeah, hi, I'm calling about 123 Main Street. I live down the street. I want to see what's happening with the property. Oh, hold on, that's somebody else. All right, transfer me to somebody else. Same line, transfer me to somebody else. Hi, I'm handling the property at 123 Main Street. I'm like, oh, hi, my name's Carl. I'm actually an agent. I was calling because I saw this property got foreclosed on Wednesday. I drove past the property. It's vacant. I have some pictures. I would just love to send it to you, and I would love an opportunity to be in the running to handle that listing for you. This is what I specialize in, and this is what I do. So what would happen? Sometimes they would say, oh, I don't know about that property yet. I would say, hey, no problem. Can I get your contact information? Can I email you over a picture? Can I call you? My goal was to never get that property. I mean, I did sometimes. There's times where I made a phone call and I got 2 listing assignments that day because I built a rapport with the asset manager. But my goal was just to get in, just to get the contact, to start building the relationship, right? So many people get attached to like, oh, that asset manager didn't give me that property. Who cares? They have another 200 properties in the pipeline. You don't get that one. You want to be in line for one of the other ones, right? Don't get attached to your immediate process. I say this all the time, your immediate result. Get attached to your process. Don't get attached to the immediate result, right? It's like going to the gym. I worked out one day, I ate grilled chicken once, I didn't lose 30 pounds. Does that mean that doesn't work? But if you get attached to your process, the results will come. Everybody always looks to go from 1 to 100. Why don't you just focus on going 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20? So my goal was just to get the name of the contact. And sometimes I would get the name, I wouldn't get an email address, but if I could, score. If I could get the extension, score. Right? So this didn't happen overnight. And this didn't happen with every property. And sometimes you'd call a bank and then you'd find out that they're the ones not really handling that property, that it's another bank. It's like a Ouija board. I was just sick enough to go down the process with them and go from bank to bank. Nobody ever handed me an REO. I didn't have a family member that worked at a bank that set me up. This is exactly how I did it. So I would try to get the name of the person. So once I would get the name, you know what else I would do? I would try to look them up on LinkedIn. I just wanted to get the spelling right. I would look them up on LinkedIn. I would never message them through LinkedIn. Who here gets messages through LinkedIn? It's weird. I didn't want to be weird. So I would get it. And then what I would do is I would send, if I got the name, but I couldn't get the person, is I would send them an email. But I didn't have their email address. But one thing I noticed with companies is, did you ever know this about companies, is they kind of have a pattern of their email addresses. Right? It's first initial of their first name, their last name @company.com. So what I would try to do is I would try to figure out the name, the email address of when it had the name. I tell people this, they look at me like I'm nuts. So I would set up an email, I'd put the picture, I'd put the property address, put a little bit about me, and I would try 8 to 9 to 10 different variations of what the email address could be, and I would send it all as a blind copy. Because what happens when you send an email and it's not the right email? So if I had 8 email addresses, I would have 7 that would bounce back, and then I would have 1 that would go through. But since I blind copied it, I didn't look too crazy. And through process of elimination, I was able to figure out what the email address is. So what I would do is, again, send the email, hey, I would love it, if not this, how can I get in your network? And I would get responses that way if I couldn't get them on the phone. I would send a video email. Try to put the face to the name. So it was really important, different ways to get through it. And then once I just started building my database of asset managers. And then sometimes I say, I don't handle, and you know what happened a lot? I'm sorry, Carl, I don't handle New Jersey, but my colleague Wendy does. Oh, I'm sorry?
Gatekeeping
The
it over
gate,
something
yeah.
else.
Hey, Wendy, John told me you handle New Jersey properties. Is that correct? He spoke so highly of you. I have this property at 123 Main Street. I would love an opportunity to service that property for you. And that's how I would get in. And then, once you get the asset manager on the phone, I was told you're handling 123 Main Street. Is that correct? Yes. No. Okay, if you don't, who does? Wendy. I drove by the property. It appears to be occupied. I could send you some pictures. I would love an opportunity to work with you on this asset. Well, Carl, we already have somebody else in mind. Hey, no problem, but I see you have other inventory coming up. Is it okay if I send other pictures, right? Ask for the permission to do it. I came across a lot of nasty people whose names are still ingrained in my head. If I had $1 for every time someone told me they wouldn't work for me and they ended up working with me, I wouldn't need to be doing this, right? You got to get through the rejection. The asset managers would literally say to me, we are closed in New Jersey. We're not accepting any new brokers. And I said, that's fine, but when one screws up, I'd like the opportunity to replace them. They already said no. What else do I got? What else? I don't have a property with them now. Why am I afraid to say that? Because you know what would happen is somebody would screw up, and I was still there. I'm like, hey, right? And I would even ask asset managers, give me your problem. This one's backfired on me sometimes, but give me your problem property. Give me the property with an oil tank. Give me the property with squatters. Give me the property that nobody else will take, because I want to prove to you that I am worth having in your network, and I'm going to make your job easier. I ask them straight up, what are you looking for when choosing an agent? I want someone that communicates. So what happened now is a lot of the banks are rehabbing properties. So I want somebody who's able to project manage a property for me, who's able to oversee the rehabs. I would ask them, how do I win with you? How do I lose with you? If I do a great job on one property, is there opportunity for me to handle a larger amount of volume? I did this with a guy named Larry from Texas. And I had this conversation with Larry, and he goes, I need somebody who can oversee rehabs. I said, I just oversaw 5 of them for Wells Fargo. They were each $90,000 a clip. I had 2 properties after that phone conversation with him. But things you don't want to say. I talk to a lot of agents. Well, why do you want to get an REO? I have a lot of investor clients that I would love to connect with our inventory. They're never going to get a property. The reason is the REO business is they want more transparency now than ever. How many times have you seen a listing, it's a great price, you have an investor that wants to buy it, but there's a 14-day waiting period on investors. They only want owner occupants. The banks don't want these properties sold off market. The banks want them on the market. They get audited, and they have to show that it's been on the market. They have to show there's a lot of revitalization. They want to sell to owner occupants first. In fact, they're pretty much government mandated. So if you're going in there saying, oh yeah, I have all these investors that want to scoop up these properties, what do you think the asset manager's thinking? You're probably not the right fit, all right? My job, and I would tell asset managers, I would say, you know what my job is? And they'd say, what? My job is to make your life easier. I said, the easier I make your life, the more you're going to want to work with me. So if you give me one property and show you how I can make your life easier, it's going to be a good relationship. So I would ask them, what is your strategy? Are you selling houses as is, or are you selling them renovated? And then again, I would send a picture of the asset with an intro asking for the assignment. That was one of my most powerful things that I did to get properties. Because you know why? Everybody else is calling asking for something. Give me a property, give me a property, give me a property. I'm calling offering something. Hey, asset manager, you know how I told you I want to make your life job easier? I already did an occupancy check for you. Here's the property. Who do you think they're going to remember more? And then what happens is this, when a new assignment comes in and they have 200 brokers in, and they say, oh yeah, Carl, he's the guy that really helped me out on that, and there's all these other people who just keep asking me for something. Who do you think they're going to give that property to? So follow-up. So after I made that phone conversation, I wanted to make something to stand out, but I didn't want to go over the top. I didn't want to send a TV, right? Because there's a very fine balance in rules and laws and regulations and all that about what we can do. But I'm like, how do I stand out? So we used to send a tin of cookies. It was $30 to the door. There was cookies. It was wrapped in my company. It had my information on it. And we used to send them when I would talk to them. Great talking to you. If you think this is sweet, it'd be sweeter working with me. Cheesy. And they would follow up and thank me. And they would want to give me a property because I sent them cookies. We'd send them a handwritten note with a card, thanks for the opportunity. Because you got to remember, these are people who are typically working in a cubicle 9 to 5. Dude, the cookies was like an exciting part of the day. The first listing they would give me, I sent them cookies again. I went to a conference in Denver for Fidelity. I'll never forget this. I got called the Cookie Monster by an asset manager in front of a whole group of people. They're like, wait, you're Carl? They're like, yeah. They're like, oh, we call you the Cookie Monster. We love the cookies, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, keep sending me properties. I'll keep sending you cookies. But what it did was it made us stand out. And think about your sales business. What is the experience like with you that makes you stand out from another agent? Is there something? And I'm going to tell you this, that if you really don't know the answer to that question, you got to do a little deep soul searching of how do you provide that experience? What makes you stand out? Right? Mine wasn't just the cookies. It was the thoughtfulness of sending something, and it was be able to stay top of mind without annoying the person. Handwritten note, Starbucks gift card, latte on me. It's just some quotes and stuff just to keep yourself relevant. Call, follow up, hey, did you get the cookies? I found this other property, 234 Main Street. I would love an opportunity to service this for you. So really, it's just old school prospecting. You want to get in front of the person who decides where the asset goes to, or the person who can get you in their broker network as an approved broker. Because once you get in and you do a good job, which I was able to do, is then I was able to exploit the relationship. Exploit's a bad word. I was able to grow the relationship. Because I would say, hey, oh, this is great news. We're closing on 123 Main Street. What else you got coming up? Love to be able to service more properties for you. And I would literally tell them, the team, which I would go over in a little bit, that we had to manage the properties at a highest level. And I used to tell banks, there's a bank I dealt with, I actually had to go to Texas to interview with them. And we were in Texas, we were at a conference, and we're sitting there, and they're like, listen, we only want 8 brokers in the state of New Jersey. We have about 25 people we're interviewing. You're one of them. They're like, why should we hire you? I said, I get hit by a bus tomorrow, you won't even know. They're like, that's the most aggressive answer we heard, but it makes sense. I said, well, do you want an agent who, if they go on vacation, isn't going to be handling your assets? Or do you want me, if I get hit by a bus, you won't even know it, and your properties won't be affected? So we got in as one of the 8 brokers to a very big account on the tagline that if I get hit by a bus, you won't care. But it's just having the systems and stuff in place. But you know what? That's scaling any business. So we could do the handwritten note, the cookies, and then just keep constantly following up with other properties. So let's just say I would send it to an asset manager. They would never respond, but I saw another one. I would just send it to them anyway. And then eventually they would give me a shot. And then you got to do a good job when you get it. Any questions about that? Any questions about, Frank?
Why the pictures? Why did they want the pictures? Is that something that they want on every file anyway?
Yeah, so they're going to want that for their file anyway.
And so you're advancing it to them without them having to, before it's assigned to them.
Yeah, and the occupancy check. Really, and the biggest thing I did it to was just to make myself stand out, right? And I would say, because I would also say, hey, there's a lot of laws in New Jersey about what you can and can't do when it comes to houses and status of occupancy. But I always tell the bank, like, hey, it's vacant. I didn't approach I didn't do anything, but here's a picture. I just drove by. It's vacant. If you need a contractor to rekey it, we can handle that for you and everything. So remember before I said a lot of people think that all you do is get an REO listing agreement and list the property? I maybe had about 5 of those in my total career. I was selling thousands of REO properties. So great, here I am. I just prospected for 6 months. I got my first assignment. I got a listing. I'll never forget it, 11 Stonegate in Watchung. I was like, Watchung and Homedale. I was like, I like this business. Anyway, so I get the listing.
Really?
Yeah.
My parents live in Close.
Well, I sold the right next was a PNC foreclosure back in 2000. Pretty sure it was 11, but it was definitely Stonegate, the townhouses on the hill.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was my first. You never forget your first one. But it was, I think it was 11. So I get the listing, and then I'm like, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing. So you get the listing, you got to check occupancy. So what happens is when you're doing REO, do you know what else you are besides a listing agent? You are a free property manager. That's right, free. Everything I'm going to describe to you, you know how much extra you get paid? In case I didn't explain it well enough, $0. And you know what? You know how much you can negotiate your commission with the bank? 0. You either take it or you don't. So I get the property assignment. I don't know what to do. So the first thing you do, though, is when you get it is you need to do an occupancy check. Stage 1, you need to go to the property. You need to see if the property is occupied and vacant. I'll share a little story. I was on 38th Street in Pennsauken. We were going to do a cash for keys, which I'll go into. I'm dressed up. I'm poking in through the windows because the guy's supposed to be in the guy. Next thing I see is all these cop cars. I'm like, oh, cool, cops are around. Next thing I know, all the cops are looking at me with their guns. I was like, whoa, that's not as cool. And the guy comes out of the house like, no, he's the realtor, he's the realtor. I was like, oh, I'm just the realtor. But stuff they don't teach in real estate school, right? So, because I was doing the occupancy checks, they saw me poking through the windows and everything, so people called the police. You know, and here I am like, oh, police are coming. So a lot of things happen that aren't in control. So when you check occupancy, one thing we'd always do is we check the electric meters. So with the electric meters is, has anyone ever really looked at an electric meter? So when an electric meter is on, it spins. The last bill people will stop paying is the electric bill. How else are you going to charge your cell phone, right? So what we do is if we saw that the meter was not spinning, we would know the property was probably vacant. What we used to do too is we covered all of New Jersey, so it was tough to get out the properties right away sometimes, is we would call the electric company and try to get, if you can have an electric company tell you whether or not an electric is on or off, you are really good on the phone. You want to talk about gatekeepers. So we would call the utility companies, we'd see what the status is. A lot of times though, you could tell if there was just overgrow and landscaping, snow season, and your only house, the driveway is not plowed. So there's a lot of different things that you could tell when doing the occupancy check. So let's just say the property's occupied. We report back to the bank. What do you think is next in the process?
Can I ask you?
Sure, yeah, Chris.
Just not allowed to just ring the doorbell ever?
I mean, you can. Sometimes you just, there's no law against it, but sometimes you're in areas or you're in a situation where you tend not to try to just ring the doorbell. I learned that one pretty quick. I rang the doorbell. I was like, hey, I'm here at the bank. And the guy was just like snapped. I was like, all right, I'm going to go through the other methods first. But so what happens is after the property occupied is the bank's going to want you to do try to do what's called a cash for keys. Does everyone here know what a cash for keys is? So what the cash for keys is, the bank will say, hey, if you go to that occupant and you give them, these are some of the numbers I've done for cash for keys, $25,000, $30,000. I gave a cash for key once to get people out of the house. So you have to try to negotiate the cash for keys. And then what happens is the time of cash for keys is when they hand you the keys, is you have to go and make sure the house is completely cleaned out. There's been plenty of days and a lot of interesting conversations when you go to the house and it's not completely cleaned out and you're holding a $30,000 check. People stare at you, right? You need to be very good at conflict resolution in this business. Right? Because again, you're holding a check of $30,000 and you're not handing it to a person because they didn't clean out the house. Things could get a little weird. So I think I learned a lot of my conflict resolution over the years as being an REO agent, because one of the things I was always able to do was calm the situations down. So if you can't do a cash for keys, the next thing the bank does is an eviction. I remember the first time I went to an eviction, I felt like I was like, dun, 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 dun. Like I didn't know what was going to happen, but you got to get the locks and the movers. Again, a lot of it is conflict resolution. The homeowner or the old homeowner is anxious because they don't know what's happening. They have the sheriff officers there. So you actually have to attend the eviction. Again, when I go back to about the court system in New Jersey, it takes a long time typically to get from an occupied property to an eviction. What you're doing that whole time for the bank is every week or every 2 weeks is driving by the property to take pictures, to upload to the bank. Now again, how much are we getting paid for this? Zero. So you got to really commit to this, is what I'm just trying to tell people. So you're doing that, you do the eviction, you get the property cleaned. Then the banks typically will want clean out bids to clean out the trash. You have to get multiple bids. They don't like your bids, you got to go back. Then, now they want repair bids. You have 3 days to get 2 bids from contractors to fully rehab the house. Beautiful part is your contractor probably has a 5% chance of getting the job of actually doing the rehab. So now you're burning out your contractors getting free rehab bids. They want it in 3 days. And then the bank gives it to one of their contractors. So you're burning your relationships with contractors and you're just running around like a chicken with your head cut off. Doesn't it sound like a fun job? But this is what realistically happens. This is what REO agents aren't telling you and what agents who are presenting offers aren't seeing the agents going through. So then you have to oversee the rehab. So let's just say you got the property in August. The eviction was in February. Now they're rehabbing it. You might not relist that property till next August. I've been summons and warrants put out for my arrest because of banks. I was in Belleville court, I don't know, 15 times because of a property I was managing for the bank, and I kept getting summons, and I kept dealing with the inspector. And thankfully I didn't get pulled over, and I didn't know there was a warrant out for my arrest for being a realtor. But this is all stuff that just comes with the territory that people don't see. So now you got the property vacant. You have to turn on the utilities. I don't know if any of you have really dealt with turning on utilities at properties in a volume game, but usually they want somebody at the house. Usually they want to turn on water and you want to make sure that it doesn't flood the house. That's a pretty big thing with the bank. So it's a lot, and doing the property inspections. So it's a lot of legwork before you even get your list price. You could be working on a property for a year and a half, 2 years. I had a property that took us 4 years to get from assignment to closing because the evictions kept getting postponed, the court system, it was a nightmare. There was bad tenants in the property. It was just a lot. Heather.
With assignments, is it like a listing agreement in the sense that they are committed to you for a certain period of time?
Heather, that's a great question because no. You could get a property assignment. You could be handling the property for 6 months doing all this, and then the bank could get taken over, something could happen, and they could reassign the property to somebody else. Happens all the time.
So how do you protect yourself if you don't?
You can't.
Take a chance.
You got to get out of the REO business. Because this was my attitude, was this would happen to me, but you know what, with the law of averages, it's going to happen to somebody else, and I'm going to be the beneficiary.
Is this why REO agents are practicing?
That's why I don't have hair. Even when you get your list, so great, let's just say this, fine, property's rehabbed, everything's great. A year later, you're only $2,000 in reimbursements. You finally get that listing agreement. In the listing agreement, the bank puts that they can cancel the listing agreement at any time for any reason.
Now, do they have to reimburse you for your reimbursement?
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay.
So when you get into that, that's a whole nother story. But when you get into that and you get the listing agreement, everything's great, you have no protection. They can flip that property at any time. I had listings that I worked on for years. Property was listed, deal falls apart because of inspection issues, nothing out of our control. The investor wants to try a different agent. All right, great, thanks. Have a great day. But I had that mentality, and I know the business to know that that's what's going to happen. And when you're doing it at volume, it's not a question of whether or not it's going to happen to you. Just a question of if and when it's going to happen to you. So I knew that I might lose properties that way, but at the same time, I've gotten $600,000, $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 listings that were flipped to me ready to go. So just part of the gig. So marketing REO property. We talked about marketing REO property. This is a little bit different. We talked about this before. Owner occupant versus investors. HomePath, Fannie Mae was really well known for this for the first 14 days. Agents used to always ask me how to get around that. I'm like, you don't. They will go after you. You know, there's some people who go around it and get around it, but to me, my license is worth more than one deal. So, what we're seeing now is they're going to want more owner occupants. Multiple offers. I tell people the same thing that I would tell people in a residential deal with multiple offers. Give it your best offer the first time. An offer where if they accept it, you're happy, and if they decline it, you're okay. Right? Well, who here has had that buyer where the offer doesn't get accepted and they suddenly want to go up another $15,000? Right? I had this case once. It was a house in Montgomery, New Jersey. I was dealing with Wells Fargo. They did a highest and best situation. And you got to remember too, banks aren't in New Jersey. Banks don't care about attorney review. Once a bank accepts an offer in their system, it's under contract. They don't want to hear about attorney review because they're dealing with 50 states, not just New Jersey. So I had a situation, house was in Montgomery. I just vividly remember this. Guy lost the house, let's just say, and his clients wanted to go up. And I said, listen, I literally can't put the offer in the system. An offer's been accepted. He's like, yeah, I'm going to report you to this. I'm calling Wells Fargo. And the only reason I remember the agent was he just had a cowboy hat in his picture and it just like ingrained in my head. Because the guy was just trying to make my life like a nightmare. And he's like, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, I really don't care. He's like, what do you mean you don't care? I was like, because I'm doing nothing wrong. Just because you think I'm doing something wrong doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. I'm doing everything I can. I even emailed the asset manager that you wanted to increase your offer $15,000 to protect myself, that I presented the offer. The seller decided. So you know what happens? I get a phone call from him. I just want to apologize. I'm like, I don't hear that word much. What do you mean apologize? He's like, I called the bank. They told me you sent it. They told me how the process works. So I give him credit that he called me to apologize because most people wouldn't have done that. So when you're advising your buyers on highest and best, and again, like I said, I'm with this even on a residential, and give that offer where if it gets accepted, you're ecstatic, and if they say no, you know you gave it your best shot. Right? Because we're seeing that now more and more too, right? How many times are people getting offers accepted after a highest and best, and then offers are coming in afterwards, and they're kicking out your offer and all that, right, in this market. That's a whole other topic. People get very passionate about that subject, but it's tough. So with the multiple offers too, and the best thing that happened in the REO business, in my opinion, was the online submission of offers. So when I started REO, we'd have multiple offers, 15. I would have to input them in the computer. My assistant would input it. You're worried about missing something. Now it goes online. So if an agent's like, hey, did you submit my offer? No, you submitted it. Or, hey, when are they calling for highest and best? A lot of it's triggered by the system. So for me, it gives me less anxiety that I'm going to get people worked up about the process. Because it's coming directly from the bank, I don't make the decision. They submit it online. If it's submitted wrong, I didn't submit it wrong. I mean, not that I would ever submit anything wrong. I'm perfect with everything. But in case they submit it wrong, so to me, it gave a lot more transparency, and it made the business easier as an REO listing agent when buyer's agents started submitting the offers directly. And I think that came from a lot of not really good REO listing agents doing the wrong thing. Transparent. So the banks want to be more and more transparent. So the offers get submitted online. Excuse me. They reply directly. And I'm going to tell you this with REOs. The highest offer is not always the offer the bank's going to take. And even in any market, we're seeing this now in this market too. So a lot of agents over the years really didn't know. I would get phone calls like, Carl, why isn't the bank taking my offer? It's the highest offer. It's this high. I'm like, well, it's an FHA offer. They're like, so the mortgage rep says they're qualified. I'm like, we have a huge hole in the roof, and it's probably not going to get through an FHA appraisal. They're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, I suggest you speak to your broker or your mortgage rep and maybe get a little bit more training on exactly how an FHA mortgage appraisal works. So it's not always the best one. Sometimes banks, too, will take a cash offer that's lower because they feel like they don't want to deal with appraisal issues. But again, tell your buyers, highest and best offer, too. I know so many agents that spend so much time trying to gather all the information on an REO where I'm like, just submit the offer.
Do you advise them on which one to take?
Once in a while, they might call up and be like, which one do you think is the best? That was years ago. Now they just click a button. They don't really ask. But years ago, they used to call and be like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? So here we are. Now we have offers accepted. Mind you, you know what you're still doing once a week while all this has been going on for a year? You're driving around taking pictures of the property. Carlton.
Yeah, question. Do you come across properties that you're listing that are occupied and they say you cannot contact them? Are you managing them? How are you dealing with that?
I cringe every time that happens.
You're having a lot of them?
No, but I've had them. I tell these, they were trying to do it a lot more during COVID. And I would bluntly just have a conversation with the asset manager. I'm like, listen, in New Jersey, we have to get C of Os. We have to get smoke certs. Like, how are we pulling this off? And I think some of them are pulled off because people are doing things that I don't know, that maybe they shouldn't be doing. But it's very, very hard to sell the properties when they're occupied. Olivia.
Quick question. Do the asset managers favor cash over hard money, or do they look at it equally?
Well, in my experience, a lot of agents represent hard money as cash. And when it doesn't appraise, there's an issue, right? They're going to favor cash over hard money all day. Even that, too, with the proof of funds. People make cash offers, and then they submit a hard money lender letter for proof of funds, and the bank's like, well, what's this? It doesn't make sense. Again, banks work by guidelines, not common sense. And the most frustrating thing is, and again, this doesn't even go about being an REO listing agent. Who's here had a listing? You accept an offer from a buyer, and getting the paperwork is like parting the Red Seas, right? You get half of it on screenshots. You get some taken by the phone. They want you to merge it together. And what are you thinking instantly? I don't want to work with this agent, right? This is a disaster. Come on. Same thing with REOs. There was agents I knew who were making offers. I would hope they would get it because I would know their package would be complete. Everything was, we would send out an email when an offer got accepted, going back into our systems, like, hey, we need the following 4 things. Please send to us in one PDF. I mean, as clear as day exactly what to do. I would get screenshots. I would get handwritten notes. I'm like, is this person even reading my email? And then I got to go back and get them. And they're like, well, why are you getting nasty? I'm like, because we're wasting. I hate wasting time, right? The banks have deadlines, and I say, if I don't get your offer in by a certain amount of time, you have to explain to your buyer how you couldn't read my email and they couldn't get the property. I'm sorry, And yeah, what we get, but you got to understand is, imagine having that conversation 20 times a month. By conversation 6, you're starting to lose it a little. But even the same thing with the regular residential real estate. It's no different. I know as a listing agent of regular residential, if I had a buyer's agent who just couldn't get it together, you were just thinking, right, I'm going to be the one that has to pull this deal to the finish line. Right, how many times have you closed a listing and you're like, well, I should have got paid both commissions. I did all the work. Right? And I want to quick on this too, bank addendums. Has anyone ever here read a bank addendum? You have? Good for you, because I never have. Because there are 30 pages of just jargon. And you know what it means? And I'm going to tell you this. I used to do this training 5 years ago, and I would say, I never saw banks charge per diem. Those days are over. They're charging per diem now. So what the bank's addendum say is that every day you don't close, they could charge you $100. And they used to really do that because they were afraid of people stalling closing because they were trying to resell the property or just give some accountability. Now they really do charge per diem. I've been seeing it more and more. But you got to remember, too, people want to negotiate the bank addendums like, oh, I sent it to the attorney. And I'm just like, that's fine, but the property might not be there. The banks don't change the bank addendums. They use them for 50 across the country. But I always tell people, if you're really working in good faith to get to closing, we're going to get there. And we're still going to have attorney review. Has anyone been through a bank-owned property attorney review? Right, your attorney types up the most beautiful 4-page letter. Beautiful Arial 12 font. Beautiful terms, and the bank just takes it and draws an X and says, are we moving forward, ? Tell me by noon tomorrow. Emailed back, if you get the email back, right? So, all right, what are you gonna do? It wasn't me, right? But you just gotta know, and the more you know this and the more you set that expectation for your buyer in the beginning, the easier the process is for you throughout. So under contract, this is what, just like in regular real estate, I say it all the time, the fun begins when you go under contract. In the wintertime, the banks like to winterize the houses so you don't have burst pipes. So when you have to do inspections, is what do people typically want on a house during inspections? They want utilities. For an appraisal, you typically want utilities. So I was that REO listing agent that would tell the buyers, schedule your appraiser when you're doing your home inspection. My buyer doesn't want to pay the money for an appraisal. Like, this is not the right buyer for this house. And I would tell people up front because you want to get everything done while the utilities are on. I've been in houses where it's been like a comic book, where I'm standing in the living room, they turn the water on, and the only broken pipe is the one above my head. And I'm standing there, and it looks like it's just raining on me, and I would just stand there like, yeah, it's my life. Here we go. Right? But there's a lot to manage. So that's what I really want to stress to you is it's not as easy as it looks listing REOs. I loved it. I mean, I just cut my teeth on it. I learned a lot about growing and scaling businesses through growing and scaling my REO business. And it also made me realize that you're going to get knocked down a lot in this business in the REO. You could even get knocked down a lot by your asset manager. I mean, some of these asset managers will give you a piece of their mind very quickly and then ask you for a job, but that's a different story. Give you a piece of their mind, but you know what? I would always remember my mom said, hey, they're gonna knock you down, just get the fuck back up. Because with this business, you're only as good as the last asset you sold. So when you go under contract, again, it's managing the expectations, it's following through. Getting the utilities turned on, making sure the mortgage commitment, making sure the deposits are there, all stuff that you have to do in a regular transaction. So inspections, this is what I was talking about, the winterization, de-winterization. Now mind you, you're a year and a half to having this property assignment. You have now taken, what's 52 divided by 2? Let's call it 70 weeks of taking pictures for free. And you still haven't gotten paid yet. Real glamorous. So under contract, finally closing, you get paid. Now, you've been taking pictures, you've been paying the utilities. You know what comes along with that? You just laid out $6,000 that you have to get reimbursed for, and your check was $6,000. Kid you not. So what you got to do during this time is the utilities, all the repairs, all the cleanouts, you have to get reimbursed. So do you think a bank, when a property's been closed for 2 years and they file it out and you finally send them a bill to reimburse, they're gonna be like, yeah, sure, Carl, here's your money back. No. You have very strict time frames of when you can submit for your reimbursements. And every year that I did REOs, I had a built-in amount of money that I was gonna lose. Even if we did everything perfect, for some reason I knew we would have maybe a 4% rejection rate on reimbursements. And I just had to mark it up to a cost of doing business. So they would say, well, the reimbursement of the water bill came in 30 days after closing. My argument would be, well, I got the water bill 45 days after closing. They said, no, it's our policy, 30 days. So then you also have to make a business decision. Let's just say my asset manager's having a bad day and I'm trying to elevate this problem for my $32 and I pissed off the wrong person. Do I eat the money and lose the account? Or do I pay the $32 and move on? So you'd have to make a business decision. There was an account I had once that I was ready to get kicked out. So I made a big deal over a reimbursement and it ended our relationship, but I was ready to end the relationship. Because again, we had enough banks where if I ended that one relationship, I always tried to come from a place of abundance, not a place of scarcity, which is how everybody should be looking at their business, in my opinion. So what I want to do is this, I want to talk about how to scale an REO team. With 250 properties, you guys might have already come to this conclusion, but I couldn't do it all on my own. It's impossible. So a little bit of a structure is we would have a licensed assistant that can handle tasks, phone calls from other agents. We would have somebody that would handle just tasking. So You might be asking, what's tasking? So some of those REO systems I showed you before is you get the great pleasure of being tasked for your whole life. And what I mean by that is you're on this system, let's just call it pyramid platforms. You accept a property, you instantly get 5 tasks. You complete a task, you know what pops up? Another task. You complete that task, you get a task that you got a task coming. I don't know about you guys, but everyone here know the DISC tests? You know what C is, very organized and all that, and task driven? On my DISC test, I'm about a 1 on C out of 100. So tasks would drive me absolutely mad because they just never stop. Then you get an email in the morning, you have all these tasks that you still haven't done, Carl. You get phone calls, hey, what's the process of this task? I would go nuts. So if I didn't have people around me that would love, oh, I love getting a new task, I would have burst. Literally. Because then when you complete that, even after closing, you get tasks. It's like they mess with you. So you get the task. So I had somebody that was handling the task and handling the utilities. Has anyone ever called PSE&G and says, you are 12th in line, you will be on hold for 45 minutes, right? And I'm going to be frank, my tasking and utilities person was a virtual assistant. Phenomenal job. They handled a lot of the tasking, they handled a lot of the utilities. I had the licensed assistant who would help answer the calls because when you had 35 listings, 40 listings on a time, you got a lot of calls from agents, right? It just became a capacity issue. We needed a billing specialist. We had one person whose job was to make sure the bills were getting paid. So we were paying salaries to get our own money back. Again, I learned a lot about how to grow and scale a business from this. So when people talked about building a team, like, Carl, I want to show you how to build a team, I'm like, there's teams out there where it's a bunch of people running Zillow leads, or there's a Zillow built-out infrastructure. If you notice who my first hire was on my team, it was a licensed assistant. Do you know who the second hire on my team was? Another assistant. The last hire to my team were buyer's agents. Because if I went right to buyer's agents without the other things, my life would not have gotten easier, my life would have gotten a lot more complicated. This was the infrastructure that we built, and at one time we had 2 licensed assistants, and I forgot one other thing, and we had a full-time runner. Yes?
Oh, you say licensed assistant, not a licensed realtor, or?
No, they were a licensed realtor, but they worked as my assistant. But I wanted them licensed because I needed that blockage of the call, send out the packages. And lastly, I forgot to put this up there, we had a full-time runner. They were on the road at all the time, taking the pictures, putting up the signs, putting the lock boxes. We get calls all the time, the lock box isn't working, this is jammed up, this is that. We had a runner out there 24/7, basically being a property manager, overseeing the rehabs, making sure the contractors were there. So real quick, let me ask a question. Has anyone learned something today that they didn't realize you had to do when you list REO properties? Was it a little bit of an eye-opener? Listen, it's a great business, but it's going to take a financial investment because you have to be able to handle the reimbursements. And if you get a big pop of properties and you don't have this built out, you will burn out and lose the account because it's impossible to manage on your own. When you start hitting 50 properties, 20 properties, it's going to get very difficult, time-wise and everything else. So you have to build a system around it. You have to make an investment in people. You have to make an investment in yourself, and you have to make a financial investment.
Did you at least get a higher split?
I probably got lower on most. No, in all seriousness, your commissions, right? Commissions in the state of New Jersey are negotiable, but your commissions were typically anywhere, it could be from 1.75 to 2.5. It all depends. It's not, you don't get anything extra for all this. But what this was I made this investment because I wanted to scale it. So to close 150 in a year, you couldn't do all that without this. So when people ask me, what's the key to growth? What's the key to scale? It's usually not the best new lead generation system. It's typically not the best shiny object that someone's selling you for $19.99 a month. It's basically investing in good people that allow you to scale. Because when I had this built out, I was able just to focus on getting the properties in the door. And people say, well, Carl, weren't you worried that they're going to do? I'm going to tell you this. My personality is the jobs these people were doing were much better than me doing it. If I was in charge of reimbursements, I would just not even do it, and I would just lose money. If I had to handle all the tasking, I would politely get kicked out of the system because I would be overdue on all my tasks. Right? And I say that joking, but I've done all of this in the beginning because I had to. But people ask me all the time, Carl, what does it take to scale? And this isn't just the REO business, this is business in general. Man, you get yourself surrounded by good people, you make the investment, you have the systems, you have the lead flow coming in, and that's how you scale. Right? I mean, Apple is such an extreme example, but Steve Jobs isn't in there building the iPhones. It's putting yourself around the good people and taking risks. You know what's funny too? I was at a mastermind in Chicago with a bunch of entrepreneurs that I was involved in. Olivier was there, right, Olivier? And they made us do this exercise. They made us write down the 5 biggest things that impacted your business. Remember that, Olivier? And I realized that when I wrote down the 5 things was typically a big risk financially or a big risk in the business. Those were the 5, and each one of those are the things that really changed my business. And what happened was I remember bringing on a second licensed assistant, thinking, oh my gosh, am I having too many people? We hit such a growth spurt when we had that second person because I had the confidence to go out and do what I was good at and was getting more business in the door. And they were really good at taking the business, servicing the business. And I think that's why I had a somewhat decent reputation at the end. The beginning's a different story. Bad partnership. But by the end, we had a different thing because we wanted to provide a good experience. So with that, are there any other questions?
I want to ditto what you said about hiring an assistant. When I was an agent in your office before Cranford, you helped me put in a virtual, which allowed me to focus on the clients, focus on the relationship, focus on generating more listings, and took all of the admin work off my plate. So completely agree, it's admin, because you can take all of that stuff off. You have all the time in the world to generate
Right.
listings, close deals, and do the real heavy lifting with the lead gen, versus being stuck in the weeds doing paperwork and answering is this available calls.
So I know I unpacked a lot of information today. We'll send out the slides. I hope you guys got a good perspective on what it takes to build an REO business. Like I said, I think the REOs will be back. There's my contact information. If anybody has any questions, we actually are in the process of building out a REO university, which unpacks this even more. So if you want more information on that, just visit reouniversity.com and sign up and keep your eye out for more information on it. But we appreciate it, and we want to do one last thing. Sure, no questions? Mas.
Quick question, Carl. So when you went to college, you got the job that you hated, what made you start REOs? Like, what made you say, like, you know what, this is something that maybe I could have success in, let's try it out?
So my original brokerage that I start with, the broker used to do it, and he said, I think this would be a good thing that's going to come back. He's like, I think you should focus on this. I said, okay. And I said, well, what do I do from here? He goes, oh, you'll figure it out. Like, okay, all right. So I didn't know what to do. I literally did not know what to do, but I knew where the information was, and once I got the information, how I could get in. And you know, like anything else is, what's the biggest thing this business is? What's this business really driven on? Relationships. My REO business was driven on relationships. Gene Tucker, Brittany Pecca, I can still say the names of these asset managers that I had such strong, solid relationships with that every time I talked to them, I didn't talk about real estate. I would call Brittany and say, how did your kid do last night at the baseball game, right? We became friends. I'd see him at conferences. We'd go to dinner. We'd enjoy. People want to work with people that they like. They don't just want to work with robots. So the business was driven, and this is a small, small world, the REO world. I had asset managers that would work at one bank, the bank would close down, they'd go work at another bank. They would call me and say, hey, Carl, we're about to get a lot of inventory here. You need to sign up, I'll get you approved, I want to continue to work with you. It's a relationship business. This is always going to be a relationship business, and there's billions of dollars in tech companies who are trying to drive a wedge in between us and our relationships. But if you focus on keeping those relationships and being top of mind, billions of dollars ain't gonna break it. So, any other questions? We're gonna raffle off some gift cards. I don't know, has anyone ever shopped at Amazon, or is that only my house that has boxes all the time?